By the end of 2023, it looks like around 2,000 McDonald's might disappear from US cities. The pressures from regulators and financial losses seems to be giving the fast food giant a right bashing. A new report done by some fancy franchise consulting groups reveals that McDonald's model is on its dying days, with a whopping 30% of franchisees going bankrupt. It's a right mess, mate. Analysts are saying that this is the first time in over 40 years that McDonald's franchisees are dwindling, and loads of them are on the verge of going belly up. The reports reckon that the management is struggling to justify jacking up fees and other charges to these franchisees who are already dealing with higher wages and the relentless rise in ingredient and packaging costs. All this has been eating away at their profits for the past few years. It's not looking good for Ronald and the gang. Franchisees are the backbone of McDonald's in the US. They're the ones running 95% of those restaurants and bringing in about 70% of the country's revenue. But here's the thing, the National Owners Association is estimating that these McDonald's spots will be making less money for the second year in a row in 2023. To make matters worse, the operators who aren't financially stable are getting caught up in this mess. McDonald's sent out an email statement admitting that inflation has been nibbling away at the profits of franchisees, but the higher-ups are arguing that these increased operating costs are necessary to keep the company on track with its long-term expansion goals. So it looks like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, squeezed by rising costs and grumbles about new operating rules. Alright, so the franchisees are stepping up their game. They're gathering together for a meeting this month with big shots on McDonald's board. They want to have a face-to-face chat and make their case heard loud and clear. In an email newsletter to about 1,000 members, one group of owners said, "Look, we reckon we're heading down a destructive path and we need to sort it out." Analysts and loads of these franchisees are proper worried. They think the franchise system is teetering on the edge of a major crisis. Some of them even saying that the whole business model is a goner. On top of that, there's a big disagreement with the CEO, Chris Kempczynski. The franchises have been moaning about the way McDonald's makes decisions. They reckon it's all over the place, inconsistent, and they're jumping from one failed marketing scheme to the next. They're not happy, mate. Not happy at all. From the perspective of the franchisees, there's just too many things that are going wrong. And let me tell you, this discontent is posing a serious risk to McDonald's grand plans for growth. If all this unrest makes long-time franchisees throw in the towel, then it's a big problem for McDonald's. Cause finding replacement franchises might not be as easy. The new ones might not have as much money to throw around, which means they'll face higher borrowing costs and smaller profits. Lauren Silberman, an analyst from Credit Suisse, shares those concerns. She reckons that in such a nightmare scenario, the average McDonald's franchisee could lose a massive 200 grand per store every year. Now that's a right kick in the teeth, isn't it? When profitability starts to suffer, it puts a strain on relationships too. When the cash flow and profits dry up, the whole thing starts falling apart. In a financial survey by the Nomura Group, one franchisee put it bluntly: McDonald's is in the midst of a proper deep depression and nothing seems to be changing. And get this, around 30% of operators are now insolvent. According to the FCC report, there's a franchisee who's gone all out and suggested that McDonald's is on the brink of its final days. And unfortunately, some operators are having to bid their final goodbyes. Take Rise Enterprises for example. They run a bunch of McDonald's joints in Pittsburgh, but they recently went bankrupt. They've got a whopping $10 million in liabilities and hundreds of employees on their books. Now they're seeking court protection to sort out their debt mess. It's a tough gig being a franchisee right now. According to CNBC, things have taken a real turn for the worse. More than 300 minors, including a couple of 10-year-olds, were found working without getting paid at McDonald's franchise restaurants in Kentucky and other states. And that's a direct violation of federal labor laws. The US Labor Department are not happy about it. Now, these franchisees are in a right pickle. They're facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in civil money penalties. And to top it off, they've been making these young workers do tasks that are illegal for Tiffany Boyd, the Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer at McDonald's USA, didn't hold back either. She said, "These reports are completely unacceptable, deeply troubling, and go against the high expectations we have for the entire McDonald's brand." And rightly so. Consequently, the board of executives have had to make tough decisions. They've decided to close down a whopping 700 locations in 2023. Out of those, 322 restaurants were the ones breaking labor laws. It's a massive shakeup. On top of that, they're also shutting down underperforming stores that haven't been meeting the company's earnings expectations for the past 3 years. But in April, McDonald's tried to brush it off, saying they're not too worried about the closings because of their sheer size. They reckon it won't have much of an impact on their market share. The situation for franchisees is looking even bleaker than just those 700 store closures though. A new bill passed in both Virginia and California is putting over 1,600 McDonald's restaurants at risk of shutting down for good by the end of the year. Can you believe it? In California alone, there are 1,218 McDonald's locations and Virginia has 455. That's a whopping 12% of all chain stores in the US. The bill is already approved by Congress. It's a real thorn in the side for fast food joints. It requires them to pay their workers a minimum wage of $22 per hour, with an annual raise of 3.5%. Now the fast food industry, including McDonald's USA president Joe Erlinger, ain't too happy about it. Erlinger says the bill makes it impossible to run business restaurants in America. He reckons it's taking essential business decisions out of the hands of local owners and their teams and handing them over to unelected council of political insiders. But that's not all. Erlinger warns that paying fast food workers such a wage could increase the cost of chowing down at McDonald's by up to 20%. Now that's quite a big jump at the benefit of the workers. As a result, doing business in both California and Virginia would become downright impossible, he says. And let me tell you, the consumers are already kicking off about McDonald's prices reaching mind-boggling new heights. Some states are charging over $8 for a Big Mac sandwich. That's a massive hike, considering that in 2020, the average price for a Big Mac was just $4.95. Americans have been going mad on social media lately, venting their fury about the sky-high prices at McDonald's spots. They reckon the chain has become ridiculously overpriced, and to make matters worse, the quality is going downhill too. You see, folks in the US, one of the main reasons Americans love hitting up fast food places is because they're convenient and comforting. But the biggest draw of all is, of course, affordability. McDonald's knows this, which is why every advert they put out is about affordability. And let me tell you, since 2020, fast food prices have gone up by 15%. Some have gone up even more than that. It's outrageous. On top of all of that, McDonald's is going through a proper identity crisis. Back in March, they shut down all their offices in the US and announced plans to lay off hundreds of workers as part of their major workforce restructuring. They put out a memo to their employees on this layoff.com website, saying they wanted to make sure everyone felt comfortable and respected during the notification period, so they'd be doing all the meetings virtually. Now, of course, McDonald's didn't comment on the memo, but the Wall Street Journal spilled the beans on it. In just a few days, they'll be releasing their earnings report, and that's going to shed some light on a whole bunch of questions. The bankruptcies, the store closures, the layoffs. They're all adding up to why analysts believe McDonald's business model is crumbling before our very eyes. Things aren't looking good for the biggest coffee chain in the world either. No wonder people aren't keen on investing in Starbucks stock at the moment. The company's got all of these uncertainties floating around and it's making everyone jittery. Even the CEO himself, Howard Schultz, has come out and said that Starbucks has lost its way. That's not a good sign, is it? According to the Seattle Times, about 20 Starbucks stores in the state of Washington are getting the boot. Why, you ask? Well, apparently they're dealing with rising theft, safety concerns, and a decline in foot traffic. And get this, they closed about the same number of stores in the state just last year for similar reasons. But that's not all, my friends. The report also highlights numerous closings in 6 different states. It seems like declining sales and consistent underperformance are to blame. You've got 4 stores near Universal Studios in Florida getting the chop, a dozen shops in Nashville, Tennessee facing closure, and 6 shuttings in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And let's not forget about the unspecified number of closings in Louisville and Bowling Green, Kentucky. Starbucks decided to shut down all of its stores in Ithaca, New York as well. Executives claim it's due to worsening financial conditions and a lack of profitability. However, some folks suspect it might have something to do with the store's attempt to unionize. The plot thickens. Similar situations have played out in DuPage, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, and Fresno, California, where Starbucks locations were shut down under almost identical circumstances. It seems like this coffee giant is facing a whole lot of challenges from different angles. It's a tough brew they're dealing with, no doubt about it. So it seems that Starbucks is having a bit of a tiff with franchisee Manhattan Capital. According to executives, Manhattan Capital didn't hold up their end of the deal and failed to pay the agreed upon 7% of the the store's monthly gross revenue and a 1% advertising fee to Starbucks. So, what did Starbucks do? They went ahead and sued Manhattan Capital. Oh, the drama. But here's the twist. Manhattan Capital then went and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, claiming they couldn't pay the debt due to a lack of cash flow. And as a result, all the Starbucks stores operated by Manhattan Capital are closing down for good. But that's not the end of Starbucks' troubles. In fact, interim CEO Howard Schultz himself said in a video, "We are beginning to close stores. This is just the beginning. There are going to be many more." Yikes! Over the past 12 months, they've closed a whopping 424 company-operated stores in the US, which amounts to about 5% of their total. So there's definitely a downsizing trend going on. And let's not forget about the challenges they faced due to the pandemic. Inflation, supply chain issues, and shortages of key ingredients and materials. All of that has led to a hefty loss in sales, a staggering $3.2 billion to be exact. And to add to the mix, Starbucks is sitting on a total debt of, wait for it, $14.93 billion. At least that's according to their most recent balance sheet. So of course, to counter these losses, Starbucks is taking a page out of the retail playbook and passing on higher prices to us, the consumers. Well, that's just great, isn't it? So if you find yourself shelling out a few extra bucks for your favorite Starbucks beverage, you know who to blame. It's the cost of doing business apparently. Starting on July 12th, all Starbucks beverages will be 30 cents pricier. In the last quarter alone, Starbucks already raised its prices by about 5%. They claim it's due to higher operational costs and the soaring prices of coffee in the global market. Apparently, coffee growers have had a hard time with extreme weather and crop failures in 2022, which has messed with supply chains. It's a whole situation. But let's be honest, the food industry is a constantly shifting game. It has to adapt to ongoing changes, and sometimes those changes are as unpredictable as the weather. And all of this gets reflected in Starbucks' history of many price hikes. You see, they're going all in on customized drinks these days. You know, those fancy concoctions with all the add-ons like syrups, foam, and sweeteners. All those little extras drive up the cost per transaction. First they had shortages of oat milk and flavoured syrups, and now by June, they're warning us that dozens of popular items may temporarily disappear from the menu. Hazelnut syrup, toffee nut syrup, chai tea bags, green iced tea, all in short supply. And let's not forget about the Frappuccino mix and breakfast sandwiches. These are the basic necessities for a classic Starbucks experience, and customers are not happy about it. With favourite beverages missing and prices on the rise, some folks are reconsidering their usual Starbucks trips. I mean, who wants to pay more for less? It's a tough spot for the coffee chain, and it's the same set of problems that caused their stock to plummet by 40% in 2022. But that's not all. Another factor adding to the uncertainty is the leadership situation. You see, back in the late 1980s, Howard Schultz took the reins of Starbucks when it was just a humble chain of 20 stores. He transformed it into a global giant with 2,500 locations. He stepped down in 2000, but returned during the financial crisis of 2008 to rescue the company once again. After that, he stepped down in 2017. And guess what? In April 2022, he came back as CEO when former CEO Kevin Johnson left. Talk about a revolving door of leadership. However, in April 2023, Schultz decided to step down from the position once again, leaving Laxman Narasimhan in charge of fixing the company's issues. Now, Narasimhan may have years of experience at PepsiCo and Lysol, which makes him a suitable candidate, but shareholders weren't too thrilled about yet another leadership change, especially during these challenging times for Starbucks. It's no wonder the stock remains volatile.